what's happened to me in the past week. So you have a little bit of understanding. I actually apparently got bit in the ear canal by a bug. It's not funny now. It's not a funny thing. And my left ear is sort of muffled because he had to drain the blister. And thank God there was no bugs crawling around in my ear, but not a fun thing. So my left ear is a bit muffled, but thank God I have headphones on so I can hear quite well. Otherwise, it sounds a bit weird. Anyhow, we're going to jump from that topic to you guys out there, our listeners. And as always, my show is dedicated to baby boomers because you know what? I'm one of you. And so if there's something I'm interested in, I'm sure there's something you're interested in when it comes to taking care of your health, your well-being. And this week was a special week because we have my sister in town, my sister Carla, who's joining us in the studio today. My cousin son got married, and she came and I asked her to be a guest. And Carla's specialty, she's a nurse, but her specialty is in hospice. And she's going to join us and share with us her experiences dealing with hospice patients and observation of some of the things that go on with them as far as their health is concerned. In many cases, may be overlooked by doctors or the medical profession in general, particularly big pharma. Also, my good friend Jim McMillan is in the studio with us as well, and he's a success story. He helps me look better. He's helping me on the internet with YouTube and all the other exposures I can get to get my show out there. Because if I can say this modestly, I was preaching the message of low-carb consumption way before many of these experts that are on the air today were born. It's been that long. And it wasn't because, I just had more knowledge at that time. It's just because I had health issues that I had to deal with. And by observing and reading and having an open mind, was able to reverse many of them. Okay. So I started to preach this, okay, as a gospel to get people to understand that the way that we're eating and living today is not healthy for us. It really isn't. So I'm going to share this forward from Dr. Benjamin Bickman, okay, who is with BYU. He's a cellular biologist, and he wrote the book, Why We Get Sick. His forward reads like this. Medical science has advanced considerably in the last century. In 1900, the top three killers were lung infections, pneumonia, and influenza, tuberculosis, and gastrointestinal infections. So if you asked the question in 1900, why do we get sick? The answer overwhelmingly would be infectious diseases. But this is no longer true. With improved sanitation, personal hygiene, and miraculous medicines such as antibiotics and antivirals, infection no longer kills many Americans. Today, if we ask the question, why do we get sick? We get a very different answer. The top 2 causes of death, as well as 5 of the top 7 causes, heart disease, cancer, cerebral vascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, which we're going to talk about a lot today, and diabetes, which we're going to talk a lot about today as well, are related to chronic metabolic disorders or diseases. Over the past few decades, all these conditions have been on the rise, but why? You're about to learn that a lot of this comes down to one root cause, insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, meaning too much insulin in the blood. But wait, isn't that exactly 2 root causes? No, they are the same thing, like 2 sides of the same coin, differing only in the way we look at it. Then we're going to skip over to his first chapter on insulin resistance. What is it? And he says, insulin resistance is the epidemic you may never have heard of. Though many of us are unfamiliar with it, our unawareness belies how common it really is. Half of all U.S. adults and roughly 1 in 3 Americans are known to have it. However, this number could be as high as 88% of adults. Even more disturbing is how common it will be in the future. And don't think the problem is just local. When we look worldwide trends, it gets even grimmer. 80% of all individuals with insulin resistance live in developing countries. And as in America, half of all adults in China and India are insulin resistant. Still, this isn't a new trend. According to the International Diabetes Federation, the number of cases of insulin resistance worldwide has doubled in the past 3 decades, will likely double again in less than 2 more. Insulin resistance was once a disease of the affluence, what I like to call plague of prosperity, or condition that largely affected only well-off older people. Recently, however, that has all changed. There are documented reports of insulin-resistant 4-year-olds, and up to 10% of North American children have it. And low-income countries have passed high-income countries in terms of total number of people with that condition. So, I mean, when you read this and you start to absorb this information that 88% of our population has a metabolic disorder, and doesn't matter if you're overweight or not, it gets alarming. But it also feeds the same thing I've been saying for so many years here on the radio, is big food and big pharma are in bed together. They make diseases that they treat with medications. And one of the diseases possibly could be Alzheimer's. And so, Carla, and your opinion and your observation, by the way, welcome to the show. You got to get closer to the mic there. Okay, talk loud. Okay, can you turn up her volume, Richie? Can her volume go up a little bit?
Hello. There we go.
Now we got her on the air. Okay. And your observation, because your specialty is hospice.
Correct.
So you deal with end of life.
Correct.
And you deal with a lot of patients, if I understand it correctly, who have Alzheimer's.
Yes, I do.
And you deal with a lot of patients who have cancer.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And so from your professional opinion, when we state some of the statistics that we're talking about today, with 88% being insulin resistant, whether they're overweight or not, and the tie into lifestyle and drugs, is it safe to say many of these conditions can be altered by intervention early in life when it comes to our eating habits, and when it comes to exercise, and when it comes to pharmaceutical implementation into their lives in general?
So you said the key word, early. And if people wait till it's too late, you can't reverse Alzheimer's. You can do something about diabetes, right? But you can't reverse Alzheimer's. Once the damage is there, it's done. So the key is to start early, like you said. I can tell you in my experience, any patient I have ever had with Alzheimer's disease is always diabetic.
Every case.
Every single case.
And I know about 30 years ago, some experts out there coined the term type 3 diabetes when they were referring to Alzheimer's.
Yep. That's what they're calling it now.
They're calling it now, finally.
Finally.
And I've been preaching this that long as well. So in every case, Alzheimer's patients are diabetic.
In my experience, yes. As a hospice nurse. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay, so early intervention means what? How early? Is it education, starting when they're children?
Absolutely starts when you're a kid. That's when you develop your taste buds, right? I think what happens is parents get a little, I don't mean to cut anybody down, but parents get a little lazy, right? And everybody's running from point A to point B all the time. Kids are in a million different activities. And so people are eating on the run, and they're just grabbing a bunch of crap. And anything sweet is so enticing, right? I mean, my clientele, a majority of my clientele are very old people, and all they eat is sweets, whether they're diabetic or not. That's all they eat because their taste buds have changed.
Yeah.
It's the same with a baby, right? That's where the taste buds are. So we have to be responsible enough to make sure that we're introducing very good, healthy foods for kids, and then develop that as a habit so that they don't. I remember raising my kids, I had crap in the cabinets, and that stuff would last for a long time because we didn't normally eat that way. It was there a little bit, but we didn't make that a part of, I made dinner every night. We sat down for meals, and we ate fairly healthy. I think I eat healthier now than I did then, but it becomes a habit. You have to just make it a habit and start early. Like you said, I don't feel like it's, our father got a bad sweet tooth later in life.
Yeah.
And when he passed away, he was on one medication. That's it. That's pretty darn good for 91 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. Took a lot of supplements, so I'm sure that helped. And married 67 years with a wife that actually cooked for him, right? But he wasn't big time into sugar until the end because he got lazy because nobody was there to cook for him, right? It was the fastest thing to grab and stick in your mouth, and the taste buds are different.
Yeah, this is again, the habits that we learned, we start these at a very early age. And the habits that we learn when people say it's in my genes, no, it's in the genes. You look down your belly.
Absolutely.
It's what your parents teach you. And when you said laziness, which is very, very true with younger people today, I'm not trying to judge anybody, because it's much easier to give a kid a fast food, okay, than sit there and fix something from scratch like our parents did when we were little kids. We didn't have snacks.
Nope.
Didn't have desserts. Okay.
Nope.
Didn't have soda pop. None of the stuff even existed back then.
Nope.
It's been that far along. But go ahead.
The comment you just said about it being in my genes, I have a friend, we're 12 hours apart in age, and he's type 2 diabetic. And I said, are you heavy? And he's going, well, no. And I said, okay, what are you eating? And he's eating the stuff that I know is causing to be diabetic. And he's going, well, it's inherited. And I'm going, do you eat the food that your parents ate? And he's going, yeah. And I said, you inherited their palate. You didn't inherit their genes.
That's exactly
it. Welcome back to Good Life for Last Year, Dr. Fitness. That's me. If you're a first-time listener, let me introduce myself briefly to you. I'm a former Mr. America, Mr. Universe twice from the 1980s. I'm a baby boomer, nutritionist, life coach, a lot of different things. I've been an expert in corrective exercise way before this stuff was popular. I was training people one-on-one way before they had personal trainers. So it's giving my age away. I'm close to 70, and I'm proud to say that I plan on being around for at least another 70 years to pester people when it comes to their well-being, health, nutrition, things like that. And I'm joined in the studio today with by my sister Carla and a good friend of mine, Jim McMillan, who actually helps produce my show. And Carla's her background is a nurse, but she's also an expert. She's a hospice nurse, and she's sharing with us today, her observation when it comes to disease and when it comes to sickness when people get older, even and it starts at a younger time with older people. And what we're talking about is Alzheimer's being a type of diabetes referred to as type 3 diabetes. And years back, I pulled up a study on Alzheimer's and the brain, okay, and lifestyle. And it was a study by Dr. Benjamin Bickman at BYU, Brigham Young University. And he talked about how the brain uses two sources of fuel. It uses both glucose and ketones. Ketones are fat. And to put it simply, okay, so you can understand it, when you eat lower carbohydrates, your body releases ketones for energy, okay, by the heart, by the muscles, by everything in the human body and the brain. And what happens with people that are Alzheimer's patients, the metabolic pathway for glucose shuts down. It doesn't work anymore. It becomes resistant to insulin. And so they don't really have a way to make energy for the brain itself, because their diets consist largely of high consumption of carbohydrate foods. So it keeps giving them the same fuel that they can't use. So they introduced ketones into the diet of Alzheimer's patients and saw some major changes with these individuals. Okay, so he came to the conclusion, and this is also in his Why We Get Sick book, that lifestyle has a lot to do with it. Not all by itself, but a lot to do with it. In Carla's observation as a hospice nurse, 100% of the time, if I'm correct with this, Carla, that Alzheimer's patients are diabetics, 100% of the time.
And it's usually type 2.
Type 2 diabetes.
Usually type 1, people don't live, into their 90s. They usually pass by the time they're like 70 years old.
Yeah, plus as a type 1 diabetic as well, it's hard to become insulin resistant because they're not producing it. But at type 2, they're producing lots of it over extended periods of time. Even when they become a diabetic, they're producing 3 to 5 times normal levels of insulin, making their cells more resistant to insulin. Okay, so it can exacerbate all kinds of disease conditions, including heart disease. Now, when you were going to school to become a nurse, what did they talk about heart disease and diabetes in regards to relationship?
So the instructor, the first thing she said is, when you hear diabetes, I want you to immediately hear heart disease.
That's what she said.
That's exactly what she said.
And she explained why?
Well, at that time, probably not, because it was the first day of that class. But as you learn more about it, you realize it was all, anybody who's diabetic, they always end up with some sort of heart disease and kidney failure. So it's all tied. And you realize that as you learn more about diabetes, all these diseases are all tied to the same thing. It starts with diabetes. Somebody might die of kidney failure, but they don't keep in mind that they have kidney failure from the diabetes.
Yeah, see, and that's when they look at number of, when you look at death in general, diabetes is listed as number 7. Mm-hmm. When they say actually it's number 3, because when a person dies, they don't take into consideration that person was a diabetic already. Oh, they had a heart attack. Well, they're diabetic who had a heart attack.
Right.
Was it the diabetes that exacerbated and accelerated the disease state in general.
Exactly.
So they tell you diabetes and heart disease linked together.
Yep.
Okay. So it also ties into line with Bickman when he's saying that 88% of our population is insulin resistant some way or form. Doesn't matter if they're overweight or not. I know in Jim's case, he can probably share with our audience his calcium score when it came to the carotid artery and how that was reversed by not only dietary change, but also berberine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
So actually, I had the carotid artery, the ultrasound. I think that's the name of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it done twice, and both times I had a 15% stenosis in my left carotid artery, and I had started the berberine 500 milligrams 3 times a day, and came back in for the test 6 months later, and my PA said, "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," because there were 0 signs of stenosis. So that was great. And then my wife and I, who's also been doing the plan I'm on, we both had our CAC scores. She was 0, I was 30. I mean, it's almost 0 when you're 30 because that's pretty low.
Right.
So I mean, to be we're both in our mid 60s, to have no blockages, great blood pressure, practically 0 CAC. I mean, it's like revisiting our youth again.
Yeah, when you get to into our age group too, mostly when you get on Medicare, first thing they want to do is start loading you up on all kinds of drugs. Because I remember when I went, because I take thyroid medication, I went in to pick up my prescription for it. I just got on Medicare, and the pharmacist came up to me and says to me, and I've got great lipids. Every doctor I see, what do? You look at your lipid profile. Triglycerides in the upper 30s, low 40s. Blood sugar 79 to 80. Okay, HDL 70, 75. Okay, total cholesterol, okay, including LDL, maybe 170 in that range. Okay. They said, what do you do? And he come up to me and said to me, your provider, in these words, this is a young pharmacist, thinks you should be on a statin drug. I go, what? Yes, your provider. Okay, who's the provider about it? Is that your insurance company?
No, the provider. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Humana. Okay. All right.
Isn't that
And I look at the pharmacist and I go, what? Yes, your provider thinks you should be on a statin drug. He says, young lady, I said very respectfully, do you know what my lipids are? And she goes, no. I started reading them off. I said, are those good? She goes, those are excellent. I said, you tell my provider to mind their own business. God. Okay, so she stopped bugging me after that. But so I was in the other day to pick up the script because of the ear thing going on. And the lady gets checking me out. Have you had your flu shot? Have you had your pneumonia shot? Have you had your COVID shot? Okay, I go, what? Have you had your shingles shot? I go, no. Do you plan on it? I go, no. Okay, that's big pharma selling big drugs. To who? Older Americans. Okay. Most older Americans, they don't live like me. Okay, they live like what you described, Carla. Okay. Okay. They don't live like Jim or Rowena live right now. They live like what you described and what we see out there. All you got to do is go into a grocery store. And I'm an observer. I watch people watcher. Because I am. I talk to everybody. Okay. And they got their shopping carts. Okay. Or they got one of those Omega things they're riding around in because they're too heavy to walk. Okay. Or they lean over the top of the cart because their backs hurt because they sit all day long. She's shaking her head over there. Okay. And what's in their cart? Chips, soda pop out the yin yang, all kinds of sweets. And I almost say, where the heck's your chicken? Where's your meat? Where's your fish at? Nothing in there. It's nothing but packaged processed foods. And all you're feeding is big pharma.
They're shopping the center of the store instead of the outskirts where all the good stuff, healthy stuff is.
And so all they're making money for is the companies that make those addictive foods. And that's why I'm glad that if Trump gets elected with RFK Jr., he's going to come up to these people like he's a lion. And he's going to chew them up and spit them out. He's going to reveal names and what their plans were all along. Because big food is making sickness for big pharma. They all sit on, all board of directors go from one company to another. Okay, and they're sharing in the profits of the drugs they make and the foods they sell. Okay, and Americans, we are nothing but a pawn, okay, in their little chess game.
And ask any physician how much time they spend in medical school talking about the diet.
How much time?
Very little. I think it's 6 hours.
If that.
They don't spend any kind of time.
But they can lecture you on nutrition.
But they don't usually. Usually they ignore it. They just want to throw medication at
Yeah,
it.
well, that's true too. But a lot of times, when you look at the American Medical Association, what their recommended diet is low fat, low sodium.
Well, now they're recommending cereals and stuff
I
too.
know, like Honey Nut Cheerios, heart healthy. Honey, I'm in a store and I see this at the end cap, Honey Nut Cheerios, and it's got the heart symbol. I go, I wanted to throw my shoe at the dang thing. What's this all about? Honey Nut Cheerios for the heart? Give me a break. It's got a little bit of fiber in it, okay? Eat some lettuce or something like that if you want the fiber. But for the heart, you want to benefit the heart? Listen to what Carla's saying, what Jim's saying, what I'm saying, and all these experts are now on the internet talking about low carb eating, okay, to help the heart health. All right. Jim reverses plaque buildup. I got great lipids. I'm sure Carla has great lipids. Blood sugar. Okay. And we're in an age group now, we're supposed to be sick. We're supposed to be sick every day. We're supposed to be on 5 to 10 different medications to control our health issues.
Ask me how many times I've called in sick in the past 2 years.
How many times?
Once.
Well, I called in sick this week because of my ear.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. But people I work with, I'm sure there's people that call in because they just want to call in, right? But nurses, in all honesty, love you guys, but a lot of them are not in good health at all. They're obese. They're just going with the flow and under a lot of stress, and they're calling in sick all the time.
Well, go to a hospital. Most of the nurses there are overweight.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a cool thing. Carla, IVF, in vitro fertilization. Okay, that's a big topic now when it comes to politics. Okay, and President Trump brought it up. RFK Jr. brought it up. Okay, nutrition. All right, what role does that play in this process?
So nutrition and hormones are all tied together,
Big time.
right? So that would be the role, basically, right? Estrogen is mass produced through fat. That's why when women go through menopause, they hold on to more fat because they're not producing the estrogen anymore. So I would say that the more, if you're not eating the proper foods, it's definitely going to affect the way your hormones work.
Yeah, years back, I had a reproductive endocrinologist here in the Valley. This is years ago now, who sent a couple of her patients in at polycystic ovary.
Mm-hmm.
She tried in vitro fertilization, didn't work. And she sent them in to me. In fact, one of my trainers, it was his sister, was one of them. And we changed her diet. Okay, we got her on Eat Like Lance, low carb. Got her exercising. Okay, and in both cases, both these women who were unsuccessful with in vitro fertilization, which is very expensive, both got pregnant and had babies normally. And it was through dietary change and exercise habits. So if we were out there preaching this gospel to people at the governmental level, okay, at the medical level, okay, at the school level, okay, at the nutritional level, we can probably help this quite a bit and reduce the number of people who need in vitro fertilization who would use that to get pregnant. Okay, all by dietary lifestyle changes. So it shows you, because it's actually in Dr. Bickman's book, Reproductive Health, too. He talks about it in there as well. That, if you want to make money, create an environment or a market for what you're trying to sell. Okay, and those are medications.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we use food for it because, again, food's the most powerful drug there is, and it's accepted by society that people have to eat. So let's make foods that are highly addictive, okay, that are processed, stuck in a package, and easy for households today where you have a mom and a dad both having to work to pay their bills because they can't support the household on one income, and they come home and they're tired, okay, and mama doesn't want to go in the kitchen and cook up a whole meal for the kids, which may take an hour and a half. She's tired already, so it's easier just to throw fast foods in front of them. And here we go. Who benefits? Big Pharma.
Yep.
So anyhow, if RFK, I know Jim's trying to get RFK Jr. on my show. And if anybody can do it, it's Jim. Believe me. Okay. He's not afraid to talk to anybody. Okay. And I'd love to talk to RFK about this topic and maybe have his former vice presidential choice on her message the other day. I think she has a child with autism too. Okay. That she talked about. and big pharma and big food tied to that too.
Mhm.
And because we know there is a link, talks about in his book there as well, that autism's tied into some form of metabolic problem, insulin resistance, one of them.
Vaccines,
Yeah,
they say.
vaccines is
But they
yeah.
also, I read something not too long ago, a study where they're linking it to, of all things, Tylenol, which is interesting because all it's much more prevalent in boys than it is girls, correct? Autism is. And who receives Tylenol much more often than girls? Boys, because they have circumcision in the hospital. And so in the hospital, immediately they receive Tylenol.
Really?
Yes. So there's no coincidence there that autism would be much greater in boys. And it would also explain why there are children, we have a family member that's autistic and he never received one vaccine. Okay. And
Well, yeah, my
our great
I have
nephew,
a grandson who has autism as well.
but
Uh-huh.
they're circumcised, correct?
Uh-huh.
So they receive Tylenol, correct? So there definitely can be a link there. And here we are looking at, all the other vaccines. Don't get me wrong, because I think there's a lot of,
Yeah.
we're way over vaccinated, but that's the first thing that you receive, and maybe a little girl will have Tylenol at some point, she gets a
Yeah,
fever
but
or whatever. But the first thing when a baby, a boy, most boys are circumcised. And sure enough, they give them Tylenol right away for the pain.
Well, that's interesting you say that because you don't the level of autism in females is much, much lower.
Much lower.
It's interesting. Of course, they're not going to say that though, that it could be Tylenol. Or are they doing that?
No, well, like I said, I saw a study. It was probably about 6 to 8 months ago. I read a study.
You know how long
Yeah.
it's going to take before that gets out there?
Peer reviewed too. So it's definitely legit. I haven't heard RFK talk about it. Maybe he has. I don't know. But it seems pretty interesting to me.
Well, if anybody would know, it would be him, you would think. But it's relatively new study,
Mm-hmm.
because Tylenol, huh? I took some today for that bug bite in my ear.
It's too late for you to get
I'll tell you
autistic
what.
now.
I thought it was going an alien in there. The doctor's looking around in my ear, probing this thing in there with the scope. He's got this thing on his head to go. And he calls this nurse. He goes, "Look at this. Look at this." Well, you went with Debbie. She was in the office with me. He goes, "Look at that thing. Look at that." He's poking on it. And he says, "Did you get hit in the head?" I go, "No." He goes, "Get bit by a bug?" I go, "I don't know. I don't feel nothing crawling in my ear." He goes, "You have a blood blister in there right in front of your eardrum." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "I said, can you get it out?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "That's what you're here for, right?" I go, "Yeah, I'm here for you to do that." He says, "I got to poke it." I go, "But when you take the picture, it looks like it got eyeballs on and stuff.
Sure does.
Ugly looking thing." So he drained it out, but I'm still deaf in that ear. He says it's going to take about a week, but what an ugly thing. But
Debbie and I have enjoyed that. He's deaf in that ear. We've made sure we're talking.
These
from that side.
headphones help. They really do. But it still echoes over here, but I can hear better. But, yesterday at the wedding, I heard the sounds in the back. I couldn't hear a thing. So anyhow, sometimes that's good. And during the break, Carla and I were talking about COVID and vitamin D and some of the studies in which some of the research she's seen, and referred to. So, Carla, if you can share that with our audience, because they're pushing COVID again and they're pushing the vaccines again. Okay, what's the relationship there?
So they thought for a while there, actually, vitamin D was actually keeping people from getting COVID, right? It's funny because I had COVID in the beginning and I have a great vitamin D level. However, a majority of my vitamin D I get through supplement. So I heard a physician talking recently. He said he had a patient that was on a ventilator. It was really bad. And he did a little research about ultraviolet sunlight. And he decided just to get that guy out into the sun. And he was on the patio for a short amount of time. And they started noticing a difference in his lungs. Long story short, he was healed through the sunlight itself. Yes, sunlight produces vitamin D, but it also has other healing prospects. And so I think that, like, even during the COVID situation, everybody was made to be inside, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, you could be taking a supplement, but you weren't out in the sun. And the funny thing is, the sunlight scientifically proves that it kills any kind of virus within 60 seconds. So being out on the park and touching things, little kids and stuff, there's no virus there. Even when you grab a gas pump, right? I mean, it's in direct sunlight. and it kills it, just like bleach or rubbing alcohol.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, they thought it was the vitamin D that was actually beneficial, and I'm sure it is, but it's actually the actual sunlight. And that's what he also said. If you notice the difference between the northern states to the southern states and how many people literally died from, yes, it's definitely related to they're in sunshine in the southern states.
And today you look at the medical community's preaching stay out of the sun. You're gonna get skin cancer. You got too much sun. It's not good for you. Well, God wouldn't have made the sun if we didn't need the sun, right? And then you look at the relationship between, because you're looking at the natural conversion of vitamin cholesterol into vitamin D3, the active form, not vitamin D2, which is made from fungus. People don't realize that is D3. And you're getting that natural conversion with cholesterol in the skin because you have more cholesterol in the skin than anywhere else in the human body. That's for healing purposes. And then they tell you to put on sunscreen and stuff like that and stay out of the sun and stuff like. Well, and they're taking statin drugs, and of course, where do you see the highest rates of COVID? Old people. And a majority of them, I would think probably 50% of the population in my age group or older, at least 50%, are on some form of statin drug. Okay. Besides the effect of interfering with production of vitamin D3 from cholesterol because of lower cholesterol levels, okay, statin drugs are also associated with increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance diabetes. And if you're diabetic already, progressing the disease to take other medications. And Big Pharma doesn't like to talk about that. Okay, so they say you need to weigh, okay, the side effects against the benefits of the drug. So stay on the drug. No one's saying not to take the medication, okay, because we can't do that. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor, okay. But what we can tell you is change your lifestyle, all right, so you can get the doctor to take you off the drug, or you have something to argue with your doctor about. Why do I need this medication if my lipids look great, correct?
Yes, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, a majority of old people are on a lot of medication, and they come into hospice and they're probably taking 20 different pills easily, right? And when they come in, one of the things you suggest is, why are people taking medications anymore if you're in hospice care? Right. And the first thing the families let go of, which is kind of funny, is anything that's a supplement, but they keep them on the medication.
Right.
Okay. I do notice as you do convince people to get rid of those medications, my patients actually get better. They're more awake. They're more alert, because what's happening is these medications are causing side effects. And a lot of them are on these medications for 40 and 50 years, and they're not metabolizing it the same. And physicians aren't treating them like individually. Metoprolol is probably the greatest medication I see across the board for old people. And by the time they're old, their heart rate is already really low. And you're giving them that medication, and it's going down into the 40s, 30s sometimes. And these people are like in la la land because their heart's beating so slow. They're sleeping all the time.
They want to fall asleep, exactly. That's because beta blockers increase blood sugar, and here we go.
So you take them off that stuff, and you can't believe the difference in people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The thing is to try to convince them to do it, though, and families don't want to do it because they've been on the medication so long, they're afraid they're going to kill them. And actually, you're not. You're actually making their life better.
Well, my father-in-law, who's in his upper 80s, he had chronic diarrhea. This is one example. We could talk about his blood sugar or blood pressure, And I asked my brother-in-law, find out what they're giving him. Chronic. Whatever goes in comes out, okay? And on his list of medications is Miralax. And I go, what? He's taking Miralax and he has chronic diarrhea? And so I talked to the nurse at where he's staying. I said, why is he taking Miralax? For regular bowel. I go, regular bowel? He's got diarrhea. Well, he could just tell us he doesn't want it. I said, well, we're going to tell you that he doesn't want it. And it fixed it. Okay. And plus, then he was on, his blood pressure was dropping down. We're talking like 80s, over 40s. And I had my brother-in-law get a list of other medications. And he's taking 100 milligrams of metoprolol a day, along with Entresto. And I said, that metoprolol, I said, that's why. So they cut it way back, and his blood pressure normalized. And then they shut up real quick because they were ready to count him out.
So you're opening another door here, because when somebody's in a nursing home, literally, the employees, okay, they're doing what is told on that medical record. They have to follow what's on the medical record. And a lot of times there's people filling in all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And the people that fill in don't do what they're supposed to do. So if you put it in as an order, they have to do it. If you put it in as needed, they don't pay attention enough to the patient or
Right.
resident to know that they need it. Okay. So the Miralax was probably
Right.
because he was constipated at one point. So they added it to his medical
Left it
record.
there.
And they, yes.
Left it there.
Exactly.
Even though he had chronic diarrhea.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Carla, I appreciate it. You've been fun. We're going to have you on. We'll do a podcast with you. We can make this better than the What's It Means people. And get Jim in there too, because Jim is great. He's got some great stuff.